The fire was, I would honestly say, the most difficult thing that I've ever gone through since I've been a member of St. Thomas of Becket in 28 years.
A fire caused by people we don't know who did it, but we're pretty sure it was arson. I was living down in Pascal Street at the time and got wakened up in the middle of the night that there was a fire up here, and I came up and the fire was in one segment of the roof. And the only reason why it was in one segment of the roof that got destroyed was because the wind was blowing away from the roof. If it had been blowing in the other direction, the whole roof would have taken fire and would have quickly been a greater fire.
The very hard thing to see was when the firemen arrived, and for some reason there was a mistake made by people at the city who diverted the water pressure eastwards rather than send it southwards on top of the hill. And the firemen were there with their hoses and just a little trickle of water to try to extinguish that fire, and the fire was burning more and more.
When I got here, the firemen were still here, and there was hoses and water all over the property. So what I had to do is I met Dick Merlo and Joe Dawson, and we decided to have a neighborhood watch, because as the day grew on, more and more people came up trying to get into the church. We didn't know what their intentions were. Since I was a bell technician, we had the service on the phone, plus we had lights to try to keep people away. Plus we had the gentlemen each taking an hour turn throughout the night. My main job was, during that night, I kept back every hour to keep putting oil in the generator so we'd have lights. But in between that, we took all the things we could clean, because the next morning, Father Jim wanted to set up a mass at St. Charles School.
The next day, when I came in and looked at the church, and wires just hanging down everywhere, everything was just blackened with soot. So many things were on the floor. It was heart-wrenching. I just couldn't help but cry and had to turn around.
I heard it on the radio when I woke up in the morning that there was a fire at Pierrefonds, top of St. Anne Street. So I got in the car, I came up, took all kinds of pictures. Then I almost was late for work because I stayed up here too long and taking pictures. It was terrible.
We came up, of course, there was nothing we could do. But it was very, very emotional still. And afterwards, as I said, all we could do was all join together to help rebuild our church.
So needless to say, the next day and for the next few weeks, we had lots of challenges. There was heavy fire damage in the church, in a couple of sections of the roof. There was water damage, smoke damage, and the smoke damage went right through the big hall.
The first Sunday, we had Mass in St. Charles School Hall. We had lots of offers from St. Michael and All Angels, and also from St. Genevieve, and we would use those churches for funerals and weddings. Within about a week or so, the church hall was fit to be used, and that's where we had Sunday Mass. And it was quite nice, actually, because there was a certain intimacy there, although Becket has been designed well for that kind of closeness. Very quickly after the fire, a committee came together. That's the resourcefulness of the community here was very great at that time, and they were ready to take leadership in talking about what they would do, how they would continue. And Linus Cassidy accepted to be the chairperson and to be kind of our control person. But Linus, of course, was having the beginnings of his cancer at that time, and so within a few months it became apparent that Linus could no longer function. Guy Filiatro had a certain availability at the time to meet with insurance adjusters, with contractors, with the architect John Bird. So the work of rebuilding took place because of the time that Guy Filiatro put into this as a volunteer.
And it was a very, very interesting time. The battles with the insurance company were difficult. They estimated the fire at $350,000, So for them, had they signed a check and walked away, they would have been happy, you know. But in a fire, as you demolish progressively, you discover more and more damage. When we submitted our claim, the adjusters undercut our claim by $50,000, and then I called the insurance company and I said, I can't believe you're taking a church for so much. And after about an hour and a half of arguing with the president of the company, I said, why don't we split the difference in two, you know? So we ended up getting an extra 25 right at the end. John Bird, the architect, was just fantastic. He had the original designs. He was open-minded to what we were suggesting. I was very lucky because I had good parishioners that were able to structure what we called a steering committee for the reconstruction. So one portion of the steering committee was the building, one portion was the liturgical effects, and another one was fundraising. And Beckett Players was wonderful and helped us in many, many ways in this, you know. But because I had very competent people in each division, it was easy to chair and to manage, you know. Emil Chiz, for instance, was the liturgical vestments and vessels and things. The ladies from various choirs, Carl Jorgensen, all had their say in how we rebuilt the front and the choir portion and which instruments we bought. And Dan Nolan is a lawyer that helped us push the project through in a legal way. But Ernie Cassidy was incredibly patient. He's a chartered accountant, so he saw every document, every expense. I was in my basement for about 6 months, the poor guy, just trying to put all this together. It's interesting to see how the crucifix that's there was left intact. So even though it was at the front of the church in the intensity of the fire, it's a constant reminder of how damaged the church was after the fire. The 3 statues were also damaged, but they were sent to a reconstruction site. I think incarcerated people that do this kind of work were given a mandate, and it worked out very well. The tabernacle that we have now came from another church in Montreal that had been demolished. And then, as we were rebuilding, we brought in a lot of nice improvements. The lighting system, you know, originally it was dark, and now with these lights we see the nave better. The mosaic that is behind the altar was designed by Fran Merlo, and her team created the actual glass framing for it, you know, and it was put up there in sections, and a very, very interesting contribution. You see the stained glass window going up at the back, and it was part of the overall design, and it turned out very, very well.
Sid Goldsmith, the artist who produced the Reredos, the white background to St. Thomas of Becket Church, and who did this as a donation. There was an opening mass that we had already arranged for with the bishop the night before. Pews hadn't been put down. You know. When they came back in pieces. Every row is almost different. There was a dozen of us at least. We were trying to put them together. Ultimately, we had to go back to the architect's plan, and in great detail, each little piece was measured out and outlined in the plan so that we could take the pieces that we had to line them up in the way that they should go. And so up till 1 o'clock in the morning at least, people were up there putting them all together. But that was a very last minute sort of organization. Rectory with Cahill Hall, or outside of the what the insurance money provided for. The insurance money provided for the church as it existed before, and didn't provide for building Cahill Hall, because there wasn't any hall there before. There was just a little room behind the altar. But Cahill Hall was built because there was little space for meetings. It was built as a hall that could be divided into 2 and used for smaller meetings, because the big hall often was taken up by other things. And the present office downstairs was built with the idea, and initially became the other meeting room.
The rectory, which at the time Father Jim didn't want to see. In his humble ways, he didn't want to live in what he called a Hilton. and we decided that we were going to have a rectory, not for him only, but for all the priests that would come, that would really like to have that kind of comfort, if we can say.
As we prepare to move in, just a beautiful morning up here. A little cold. There's the sun just coming up. What are you doing there, Bernie?
I guess the microwave is supposed to go on top.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess it has to be, doesn't it? Most guys don't install it.
Is Helen hard at work?
Yes, I need proof, right?
Right.
Bring this home, right?
Otherwise, we never know you were here, right?
That's
I'd like to say a few words.
Few words into the broom. Hey, Giselle, who are you going to give that out to? Is that the cleaning award? Giselle, is that the cleaning award?
No, it's the rectory award.
Does that guy up in the top, how come he's got his finger sticking up? Nice. Hey, Mary? We could set up a suntan party. Huh? You're going to pull my plug?